Welcome to Prophetic Perspectives on Current Events. I'm here today with Chris Reed. I think we've got a full meal deal for you today. We've got a number of things we want to talk about. We want to begin with kind of tag teaming on with some of the things we covered last time. But remember, the overall theme that we try to use, or the outline, is the three questions. What is happening? What is not happening, and what can we do about it? Now, also, I'd like to remind you that, we're seeking to cover things from a biblical, Christian, and prophetic worldview perspective. Now, because we predict something, that's not necessarily meaning that we want it to happen, agree with it. Predicting is just predicting. There are a lot of things I've been given to predict in my life I didn't like at all. I prayed about, interceded, Lord, can we change this? Can this not happen? But we still have the responsibility to share things as we see them and as we believe they're appropriate and can help us to be prepared for these times. Now, the last time we talked about the DOJ, Department of Justice's threat to parents who were challenging school boards and to investigate them as potentially domestic terrorists. Most mind-boggling thing, I cannot believe anything that I remember in my lifetime so bizarre coming out of our own federal government is that so far out of bounds. And I think we covered that pretty well last week. How far out of bounds that is, how it is a very fundamental attack on our First Amendment rights, freedom of speech. But then how it came out, Terry McAuliffe, the Democratic candidate for governor, of Virginia, how he came out and said parents had no right to know what was being taught to their children in public schools. I mean, that is the most bizarre statement. And conservatives have believed liberals thought that for years. But here's like proof, and not a single liberal, not a single leftist. I really don't think they can be called just liberals anymore. They've gone way beyond what traditional liberal politics were in America. But no one even spoke up and said, that's not right, that's not true. We don't believe that. Parents definitely have a responsibility. And of course, they have the right to know what their children are being taught in schools. I mean, it's bizarre, but none of them spoke up. None of them at all, refuted that. But to call them terrorists, I still can't believe that, because they would challenge school boards for the garbage that the school boards are allowing to be taught to our children. Now, one thing that did, I think a big favor it did to the whole country, it woke up even more parents than ever before. That was a shock. That was a social earthquake that went throughout the country, that this is where our government is. This is what our government believes. So many more, but I've just been trying to follow the tracks and the things being said, but I think it shocked many into saying, what in the world are they teaching in our schools? Yeah. Then finding out what is being taught, starting to look at and read their kids' textbooks and what they're being taught, and the shock has been unbelievable. I mean, it's like, how did it get so far? How did this kind of evil ever be perpetrated in our schools, even to very young children, by our government, public schools? So it's created a massive social earthquake in education. It's leading parents to seek an immediate alternative to public education. for their children, which you can understand why. I think it's going to be a massive wave, and I think it's right. You know, the wheels have come off of public education in our country, from elementary school through university. It's not working anymore. I think it's even counterproductive to preparing our children for their life in this world and to be productive, to be, you know, prepared for what they're going to face in life. It's, I think it needed to happen. Thankfully, it's now happening. But we have a responsibility as Christians to be salt and light. To me, one thing that means to be the light of the world is to have answers to the darkness, answers to the major problems and issues and crises of our times. Now, I want to back up to the beginning of modern education. Just a minute, talk about a few things that I think every Christian, should be aware of, and I think we should take as a really high priority in this time when we see what is being inculcated and indoctrinated, our children are being indoctrinated with right now in public schools. John Amos Comenius was called the father of modern education. A lot of nations in their history books, he's known as one of the 5 people to most influence the modern world. And he became a spiritual hero of mine decades ago when I ran across his history. And one of these days I'll talk about when I went to visit his grave outside of Amsterdam. One time, took a couple of friends, John Dawson and Leonard Jones. We all went to see it, but I thought one of the great miracles I ever saw in Europe happened. But it was spectacular. That's a whole new thing. I don't want to digress right now, but it just impacted me. And then to see a head of state from the Czech Republic had just been there before we had and left all these gifts on his grave. He's still one of the most honored men in history. But he's called the father of modern education because he was the first to say all children deserve an education, not just the children of the nobility. And he started schools. Now, back then, and this is the Middle Ages, basically, they didn't have schools. They didn't have public schools or almost any kind of schools. Anyone who got an education was usually the children of the nobility who they would bring tutors in for them. That was basically education. There had been a couple of universities started. John Huss was a big part of one in Prague. And but anyway, this was just something just beginning to emerge as far as education in general. But for Comenius to say, no, all children deserve it, he said it is a mandate of the church. He said we're called to be the light of the world. Light is education or illumination. This is our responsibility to do. So he started schools in churches. In the movement he was a part of, and he was one of the founders of the Moravian movement. Preceded Zinzendorf by 100 years. But the remarkable things that he said about education, about schools, to me, he may really have been the only true genius to ever appear in the field of education. His insights, and I believe most of it was revelation into what education is supposed to be, is still stunning. It is so brilliant for their times. Now, we named our K12 school. We started a K12 school, I think it's about 30 years ago. I should know this, but over 25 years. We named it after Comenius. And we resolved we're going to recapture the things he said about education that has not been done. It's been lost, forgotten. And we started a school. We did things, a few radical things, like no homework. I mandated in the beginning, no homework for our students. I don't want them sent home with any homework. Home is for the home. It's for the family. And I'd read studies where even the most brilliant people among us, they say, can only absorb new knowledge for about 2 hours a day. On the extreme, it would be 4 hours a day. So I said, okay, if we've got these kids basically for 7 hours a day, and then have to send them home with another hour or two of homework to do, someone's not doing their job. Someone's not teaching them right or training them. There's something wrong with this. So I mandated you can give them extra things to do outside of class, but we need to provide a place in school during the school day for them to do it there so they don't have to take anything home. That may have been one of the most radical things we did, and it transformed, I think, education for our kids to a degree. We saw miracles. I was thinking this should be up there with the parting of the Red Sea and miracles on that level. We had children that missed their ride to school who were told, it's okay, you can miss a day, just stay home. They would walk to school 5 miles because they didn't want to miss school. Then one time I had a teacher tell me, one time all of a sudden it looked like all the students were gone. They couldn't figure out where the students were. They went to the back of this warehouse, and all of our students from the school were back there praying that it would not snow because they didn't want to miss school. Now, that to me, that is a miracle.
Yeah.
That's a Red Sea quality miracle. I remember how earnestly I used to pray when I was a kid, and I didn't know God or anything. I was praying to whoever, Lord, please let it snow so we can get a day off of school or whatever. And for them to be praying that it would not snow because they loved school so much they didn't want to miss a single day. It was radical. And you know what? The students came in fresh because they didn't have to stay up doing all this homework. They came in wanting to learn, wanting to dig down, and the teachers came in fresh because they weren't staying up for hours grading all this homework. Everybody came fresh, so there was like a dynamic that happened right away in our schools where there was a love of knowledge, a love of learning, just an atmosphere that I think is remarkable. Now, I could go on and on about that's just one little thing that we adopted from Comenius' thing. There are many, many others that are brilliant, insightful, but the nation of Finland adopted this model. The whole nation. Go look up world education. I'm not sure what term you use, but I looked it up. Finland is #1 in the world right now in education. Now, they've gone a little bit beyond what we've done. They require all of their students to spend at least half of their school day outside in nature. And they're still beating the rest of the world in education and all the basics, math, reading, all these science, things like that. They're beating the whole world. There's something here we got to get. What's happened to our education? We started, before the federal government seized, and I think unconstitutionally, seized education in America, took the authority away from the states, took most of the power and authority over education away from the states when they set up the Department of Education. Totally unconstitutional, because Constitution is clear. Whatever authority is not specifically given to the federal government in this Constitution remains with the states and with the people. It's nowhere in the Constitution did it give the authority over education to the federal government. Many other things it's done, which is badly messed up, same way, not constitutional. So, but as soon as the federal government took it over, the unions got control. When America was possibly the most educated country in the world, and going all the way back to the First Great Awakening, that we have now plummeted. The last study I saw, America was number 56 in the world in education. That study was back around 2010, 2011. They have not published anymore because it's so embarrassing. I believe we could be below number 75 now. Could be below 100 in the world because the trajectory was so down.
Yeah.
It was like we were in a death spiral in education. It's getting worse and worse. And what do they do? How are they trying to fix it? How's the federal government trying to fix it? Give them more money to do the things that obviously are not working. Isn't that Einstein's theory of insanity? Or definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results with no major change in the program, which I tell you, our education system from top to bottom, there may be some exceptions, maybe, but from top to bottom, it penalizes initiative, penalizes creativity, rewards mediocrity and conformity. I tell you, it's indoctrination, it's not education.
Yeah.
The whole system needs to be redone, and not from the federal level, from the state level. That is authority that belongs to the states. They need to take it back. Federal education under our Department of Education is so far off the rails, the train is wrecked and it's way off the rails. So, we've helped a few churches start. I think our CSEL is one of the important things we're doing. Our K12 school, producing incredible kids who are thriving in life. Now we have 20 years of graduates that we can measure, or a number of years, and just seeing them how, it can be radically different and radically better. But I think as long as it remains where our founding fathers had the wisdom to keep that authority on the local level, where the people who are most affected by the decisions of things like school boards and all, they're going to be an authority. So we've helped one church start a school. You know how we helped them? I think we went there and preached one or two messages in their Sunday morning services to just kind of impart a vision. They got it and took off. They're doing great. It doesn't take much. It really doesn't. This is easy. It's much, much easier to do education the right way than it is the wrong way, which is appalling. And I tell you, even a lot of Christian curriculums and all, it's not so much, using Noah's Ark to teach math and stuff like that. That's not what it's about. It's how they're being taught, not just what they're being taught, but what they're being taught is shocking. Now, it is absolutely shocking. So I'm just saying, we're going for this. We have a university, we've got K-12 school, we've got through master's degrees accredited. We're going through, a doctorate pretty soon to offer all that, but we're going after a revolution in education, and we would like to help anyone who's interested to get started any way we can. And we're going to do some things to help. Tell them about your vision about the ERA.
Yeah, so ERA, Educators Reformation Association. One of the ideas I felt like that the Lord had given me as we go forward is a conference for educators or potential new educators. In other words, homeschoolers, maybe parents who in the past couldn't consider, one of the parents doing homeschooling, or a lack of materials, or not knowing how to do it. Homeschoolers, private school teachers, current private school teachers, or potential ones, or churches thinking about starting a private school or Christian school. The teachers for these things, homeschool teachers and such, administrators for private and Christian schools, or even parents that are thinking about it, launching out into pursuing homeschooling. The thing is the crisis of education, what is being highlighted in Virginia right now. I feel like that there is a call going forth, and I believe that, Rick, that we are going to answer this call, and I believe Morning Star has and will continue always, but I feel like this new initiative is going to allow us to be able to be a place, a go-to source, and a conference. And we'll talk more about this in the future and give you more information. But having an annual conference at least once a year of all these people that are in alternative education or are thinking about it, and topics from everything from what it takes to start homeschooling, the requirements, because people have these questions, state requirements, curriculum possibilities, even potentially providing lesson plans. The reason why we need this alternative, the call for parents in this hour. We've recently talked about the industrial reformation in education, industries having their own schools, or, that idea being sparked. And so I think that Morning Star has an education mantle, and I think that this yearly annual conference of people, not just to come to, but to build friendships and relationships, a support structure, to know who to go to, connections to build around people that are really genuinely interested and concerned about what their kids are being taught in the public school system, and providing solutions and answers, and the moral support and the courage for the parents to do those kind of things, and as far as providing alternative education. So that's what we were, ERA, Educators Reformation Association, a company, a group, an association of people who are Christian, who love the Lord, and who love their children, and want to respond to the call as parents. Biblically, and I'll just say this real fast, do you know that in Bible days, especially in the Old Testament, we see this played out where parents were the ones scripturally commanded to be the primary educators of their children? They were told, Deuteronomy chapter 6, you can look this up, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And then it goes on to say to teach these truths to your children when they walk in the way, when they're awake, when they lie down at night. And I think what's happened is, there became even this trend of, as far as scriptural truths and education in general, parents became relaxed. Well, we can just send our kids to public school, and then we'll send them to Sunday school, as their primary Christian education. We'll send them to public school for their primary educator. And look what's happening to our culture since that has happened. I think there's a call and a mandate to go back to a biblical parenthood, and I think God is releasing a grace in this hour for parents to be responsible, to be the primary educators for their children, so they can aim their children in a good, godly, healthy direction for their life.
Amen. I think it's time. This is something, all of this is highlighting, this crisis going on in our nation, this shockwaves coming out of our federal government, it's so overstepped its bounds and all that, but we have to take the responsibility. We're the ones who are going to answer. And we're told those who do not provide for their own, members of their own family, are worse than infidels, it says. And and to me, it's providing everything that is biblical, not just food and covering, but education, protection, security. All of these things are something we as parents are required to do. But my hope for this conference, this gathering, the Education Reformation, Reforming Association, is that we could do in one conference, lay out a plan and a way to so easily take this responsibility to help any parent that wants to homeschool, help any church that wants to start a school. And, we could have one church, we got to start functioning as the body of Christ to do anything. But if, let's just say one church really felt to take on nursery and kindergarten, another one felt to take on first grade through sixth grade, maybe. Another one, high school, or certain parts where we come together. We can easily do it if we will unite the way we're required to be united as Christians in this time. So we want to present all that and lay it out so clear. Like I said, we've gone and preached just a couple of messages in churches. They got it and they went out and they did it in a magnificent way. It can be done. It doesn't have to be as complicated as many people think education is. And we all have so many more tools now available on the internet. Courses you can take, our kids can take. So anyway, we want to talk more and more. You're going to be hearing more about that. You'll hear about the dates. But also just start seeking the Lord now. What part do you have to play in this?
Amen.
Now, we're going to be back in just a minute. We've got some more very important things that we need to cover for today. This taping out about, you had this word about vindication.
Yeah.
And share what you were getting there.
So you've probably heard people say the statement, "I told you so." In fact, I think, if I remember right, the late Rush Limbaugh, the first book he wrote was entitled that, "I Told You So." Anyway, but it was just kind of a humorous thing. But I felt like one of the things that the Lord showed me right now is a current word from the Lord is what we're seeing in America right now is basically the Trump agenda proven right because it's being tested. I think the Trump policies, now we're not saying he was the role model in every way, but his policies we supported so much, so fervently. And I think that we are now seeing a wake up, an awakening in our nation that even people, certainly the independents in the middle of the country, but even people, Rick, on the left are waking up and realize, oh my goodness, we fell prey to the media's objective, just hate Trump, attack him, his character, and all the annoying things about his personality. Meanwhile, while they were focusing on that, his policies were working during his 4-year term. And now that, President Biden has come into office and initially tried to undo immediately all of these policies that Trump had put in place, which gave us one of the best economies, the best tax codes, the best, military,
across the board, yeah.
Literally, if you are, unless you're just completely biased, you have to look and see what he did. Everything was going great. Inflation wasn't going up in anything like it is now. Gas,
energy independence,
American-made products. So let's just look at a few examples of the Trump agenda. And by the way, I think he will be reemerging down the road. I do. I think even if and I personally think he'll run again, but if he doesn't, he's going to be the kingmaker. And I don't think that the Republican Party is going to in any way be successful in a future presidential election if they abandon his policies and try to go back to a pre-Republican platform. It won't work. It just
Trump platform. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just look at just a few of these. The wall, right? What was Trump's? Everybody knows the agenda. Build the wall, And, of course, we could get into even how scripturally in the book of Acts it talks about that God sets boundaries of nations for a purpose. But look at this. Since March of 2021 until now, 160,000 migrants have been released back into the public since March. 100 and that's just the figures the government's giving us.
Those are the ones they caught. They've probably far more than that came across our borders that weren't caught.
Yeah. Okay. How about this? Exporting versus import, made in America. Remember, Trump used to give his speeches. He'd say those 4 beautiful words. He called it "made in the USA." And right now, look what is happening. in our ports right now. That business owners are claiming that this is one of the biggest crises ever. You know, they're talking about for the holidays and such that shelves in stores being empty. Well, here's the thing. Here's what it all boils down to. If you are energy independent, you're not dependent upon foreign oil, which, by the way, gases went up. If you are making your goods and services in America, then you don't have to worry about how many ships are backed up so that they can be unloaded to transport them into the grocery stores and such. So made in America, the resurrection of American industry, all of these things, crime. They're saying right now that crime in 2021 in America, especially in Chicago, 2021 has the highest homicide rate since 1996. Folks, that is 25 years. Something is dreadfully wrong. And a lot of this stuff we are seeing, we can talk about so much more, but we won't. But education, which is a highlighted situation right now, and all of the the school vouchers and all alternative, alternative education was a part of the Trump platform as well. Trump gave also a large amount of money to historic African-American colleges. He believed in education, but he believed in opportunity zones. If you remember, the opportunity zones was a big push in the Trump administration. What we are seeing, folks, in all of these situations is the failure of big government.
Let me mention one other major thing. Afghanistan.
Yeah.
The meltdown there. And then, it was published. I think it was the Secretary of Defense under Trump laid out Trump's plan for leaving Afghanistan. Every single point that Trump had laid out, we'll keep the military there, we'll keep these bases, get all the Americans out first, get all of our military equipment out first, and then we'll keep this number of troops, a small number, on a base there, but whatever, until it was so orderly. It was exactly what needed to be done, which almost everybody say, yeah, we need to get out of there, just leave, but it had to be done in an orderly way. Trump offered that plan to the Biden administration.
Yeah.
Said, here, this is what we worked out was the best way to do it. They wouldn't even read it because they were so knee-jerk anti-Trump. They would not even read it. And they made every mistake, every foolish, childish, inept mistake you could possibly make in that operation. One of the most embarrassing things to ever happen to our country. But they've done a knee-jerk, we're going to do the opposite of Trump in everything. And everything they've done has fallen apart when it was working under Trump. And you're getting a lot of Democrats, most independents are now saying, we want Trump back. We can't go on down this road any further. Now we're starting to get Democrats saying that.
Yeah.
They're even having buyer's remorse over having Biden as president. I'm just saying.
One more example, Rick, that the whole vindication right now that I think that is going to open people's eyes to realize, wow, we shouldn't have went this direction. Another example, and this is a big one, the Remain in Mexico policy.
Yeah.
That President Donald Trump had worked out with the Mexican government, where people that were rushing our border could remain in Mexico while the whole processing of their migrant status and their situation. One of the first things Joe Biden did when he took office, undid that. And because of that, people started coming into our borders. There was no way border security could keep track of it. Secretary Mayorkas, he still can't give a solid answer at Capitol Hill why and how they're going about things. But just this last week, the Biden administration come out and is saying now we are going to reinstate
Trump's policy.
Trump's remain in Mexico policy for the migrants coming. This is vindication, folks. It's probably a hard pill to swallow for people that, like Joe Biden, but these were Trump's policies. And I think that if there's ever, it's kind of like one last example, what happened with the vaccine. And this isn't a pro, for, or against. I'm just making a point. When Donald Trump was harnessing the private sector to try to produce at the beginning a vaccine, before, we know everything about it that is known about it now, that's a whole other subject. But remember how Kamala Harris and all of them were coming out and saying, we don't want nothing to do with that.
They said they would not take the vaccine because it was Trump.
Now, look at the approach. Now, if you even question, if you have questions, you lose. I mean, there's policemen right now. I watched a clip this morning. They went in on their last day of work in the state of Washington, I believe it was Washington or Oregon, and signed off their final time because they refused. They don't even have the freedom to make the choice. So,
and we could go on and on.
Yeah.
With the things, but when comedians, the leftist comedians, turn on the left, it's a bridge too far. They've gone too far.
Yeah.
Comedians are jumping all over the Biden administration right now. But, as I heard one of them say, one of the real popular comedians, obvious leftist, liberal anyway, said, the cancel culture has killed comedy. I mean, it's like America has lost its sense of humor. If you cannot make fun of people, and that's not to be hurtful. I only make fun. One of my favorite places in the world, in America, is Texas. I love Texas. I always have. That's why I make so much fun of them. I call them the suburb of South Carolina and things like that, but it's because I love them and appreciate them so much. But you don't have that option anymore. People, I was offended. It's like that's the worst thing in the world. In Scripture, Jesus warned about offenses. It's like for you to be so easily offended is one of the worst things you can do. Basic Christianity is even if someone meant it for evil, you forgive. But anyway, that being said, but we're hearing amazing things coming out of Democrat politicians, lawmakers, the administration. We're seeing almost across the board right now, and they're calling it buyer's remorse. And Trump, I remember when Carlos Slim, wealthiest man in Mexico, he was pretty irate about Trump saying he was going to build a wall and Mexico was going to pay for it. And Carlos Slim went to have dinner with Trump. And they asked him beforehand, what are you going to say to him? He was mad. We're going to talk about this wall and everything. He comes out of the dinner. They ask him, they say, how'd it go? He says, I think we can build that wall. I said, he turned him so fast. But, I've spent a little time with Trump. He is totally different than his persona. And one of the most charming, nicest people you could ever be with. I mean, thoughtful. And his whole office is that way. And trust me, an office will not be that way if the leader isn't that way.
Right.
And I talk to a lot of them. They love their job, love their boss. But, he is so personal. But he wrote the book, The Art of the Deal. The deals he made for our country and foreign policy and everything else. Listen, look at what's happening with China right now. Look at what's happening with North Korea. Everything else. And, I heard one person say there had to have been voter fraud because it is impossible today to find one person who voted for Biden or who will admit it.
His voters are turned over in their graves right now because they're so disappointed.
Yeah, that's another one. But listen, we think these things have to be discussed.
Yeah.
And it's a shocking meltdown that has happened in our country in just 9 months, going on 10 months. It is shocking. The unraveling of the very fabric of our country, we've got to stand up for it. And we've got to stand up for what's right as Christians. Not because it's conservative or Republican,
Right.
but because it's right. And we need to stand for what's right. Now, we're going to be covering other things like this that are timely, that we should have a perspective on, that we have got to get engaged with, like so many parents are right now in their school boards and things like that arising up. If Christians wake up and get engaged, our country will get back on track. Thank you so much for joining us for today for Prophetic Perspectives. You don't want to miss the rest of this program. We have got some important things for you that I think you're really going to appreciate, and you don't want to miss this program next week either.